On the frozen morning of December 17, 1944, a checkpoint outside a small Belgian town sat waiting in the bitter cold. The military policeman's breath hung visible in the crystalline air as he raised his hand, stopping the approaching jeep. 3 soldiers inside wore American uniforms that seemed convincing enough at first glance. Their weapons appeared regulation. Their English sounded almost native. But Sergeant William Creel had received warnings about something that defied everything soldiers understood about combat and military law. German troops might be operating behind American lines, dressed head to toe in American uniforms, speaking American words like natives. He demanded the password. The men hesitated. He pressed again. Their English wavered, cracking under the pressure. Then Creel spotted them. The Sten guns. British weapons. No American patrol would carry those. Within minutes, the 3 men found themselves in custody, their deception unraveling completely. Beneath the olive-drab American uniforms lay German field grey. Unteroffizier Manfred Pernos, Obergefreiter Günther Billing, and Gefreiter Wilhelm Schmidt had just become prisoners caught in history's most infamous operation. What none of them understood in that moment was that their capture would spark the most intense paranoia the American military had ever experienced. A wave of suspicion so widespread that it transformed every checkpoint into a test of national identity, every conversation into an interrogation, and every soldier into a suspected spy. The American military would develop a peculiar form of detection, not through codes or coded messages, but through state capitals and baseball statistics and Hollywood gossip. Through American trivia designed to trap those who didn't belong. The story of their capture, though, began months earlier in very different circumstances. On October 22, 1944, Adolf Hitler had summoned one of his most dangerous officers to his headquarters in Rastenburg, East Prussia. SS Obersturmbannführer Otto Skorzeny stood before the Führer, listening to words that would shape Germany's final months of war. Hitler had a mission in mind. This operation would require deception on a scale Germany had never attempted. Skorzeny was precisely the man to lead it. His reputation stretched across Europe. In September 1943, he had piloted the glider assault that rescued Benito Mussolini from his mountain fortress at Gran Sasso, flying Il Duce away in a plane that barely cleared the jagged rocks below. A year later, in October 1944, Skorzeny had orchestrated the daring kidnapping of Miklos Horthy Jr., Hungary's regent's son, forcing the regent himself to resign and keeping that nation in the war. Now Hitler was presenting him with something even more ambitious. German forces would launch a massive counter-offensive through the Ardennes forest, surging toward the critical port of Antwerp. The attack would cleave the American and British armies apart, recreating the stunning breakthrough of May 1940, when German panzers had raced to the English Channel in mere days. But this time, everything depended on speed. The Germans had to capture at least one bridge across the Meuse River intact before Allied engineers could destroy it. Skorzeny would command a special brigade, Panzer Brigade 150, whose sole purpose would be seizing those bridges before they could be blown. Then Hitler revealed a decision that gave even the hardened commando pause. This could be done faster and with fewer casualties if Skorzeny's men wore American and British uniforms. Small disguised units in enemy clothing could sow immense confusion, Hitler explained. They could disrupt communications, misdirect entire armies, spread panic through the rear areas. Skorzeny grasped the implications immediately. The Hague Convention of 1907 had explicit rules about this. Soldiers caught wearing enemy uniforms forfeited all protections as prisoners of war and faced execution as spies. This sparked intensive discussions with General Alfred Jodl and Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt. Hitler assured Skorzeny the tactic was legitimate, provided his men removed the Allied uniforms before engaging in actual combat. With those assurances, Skorzeny moved forward. Within days, he submitted detailed plans to Jodl. He needed 3,300 men fluent in English with knowledge of American speech patterns and slang. On October 25th, the German High Command issued an order to every headquarters along the Western Front requesting English-speaking volunteers for secret commando operations. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel himself signed the order. It called for soldiers with fluency in English and knowledge of American idioms. Skorzeny knew this broadcast request would reach Allied intelligence quickly. He asked permission to cancel the entire operation, but Hitler refused. The Allies intercepted the message on November 30th. Allied intelligence officers, though, dismissed it as an elaborate German deception. They could not believe the Germans would be so reckless. Volunteers arrived from across the German military, army, navy, Luftwaffe, SS. Most had no comprehension of what they had volunteered for. Fritz Kreist, a young Luftwaffe private trained as an English interpreter, believed he would be interrogating American prisoners far from combat. Instead, he found himself behind barbed wire at a training camp in Grafenwöhr in eastern Bavaria. Security bordered on paranoid. One volunteer was shot for writing a letter home containing too many operational details. The volunteers learned the truth about their mission only after they arrived. What Skorzeny had to work with would have seemed comical if the stakes hadn't been so high. Of the 2,500 men eventually assembled, only 10 spoke perfect English with authentic American idioms. Perhaps 30 or 40 could speak English reasonably well, but they possessed no understanding of American slang. Between 120 and 150 could manage English at a moderate level. The rest, the overwhelming majority, possessed only schoolroom English, capable of little more than yes or no. Skorzeny later reflected that after several weeks of preparation, the outcome was terrifying. Those with minimal English were given simple instructions. If approached by American soldiers, exclaim "sorry," then pull down their trousers claiming diarrhea, then hurry away. The equipment situation was equally catastrophic. Obey West was tasked with procuring 15 Sherman tanks, 20 armored cars, 20 self-propelled guns, 100 jeeps, 40 motorcycles, 120 trucks, and enough British and American uniforms to outfit everyone. The delivery fell devastatingly short. Only 2 Sherman tanks arrived, both in terrible condition. One broke down almost immediately upon arrival. Instead of American armor, Skorzeny received 5 Panther tanks, 6 armored cars, 6 personnel carriers, and 5 Sturmgeschütz assault guns, all German. The Panthers were disguised with sheet metal coverings, olive drab paint, and painted American white stars. Skorzeny himself admitted they would fool only very young American troops, observing them from great distance at night. The uniform supply was worse. Many were British, Polish, or Russian uniforms meant for entirely different purposes. Some were summer issue despite December weather, others bore bloodstains or prisoner of war markings. Units across Germany, confused by the vague request, sent whatever uniforms they could locate. The brigade received Polish and Russian equipment, field kits intended for entirely different soldiers, abandoned stores from multiple armies. Skorzeny managed to acquire sufficient authentic American uniforms and weapons only for his elite commando teams. The best English speakers formed a special unit designated Einheit Stielau, named after SS Captain Ernst Stielau, who would lead them. Despite the compressed timeline, these teams received intensive training. They studied American military organization, memorizing rank insignia, learning customs and drill procedures. Some were sent to prisoner of war camps at Küstrin and Limburg to practice English conversations with captured American soldiers. They watched American films to perfect their accents and absorb current slang. They memorized American brand names, sports teams, popular songs, Hollywood stars. The commandos practiced walking with American gait, smoking American cigarettes, chewing gum the American way. The missions were divided into 3 categories. Demolition squads of 5 or 6 men would destroy bridges, ammunition supplies, and fuel depots. Reconnaissance patrols of 3 or 4 men would scout both sides of the Meuse, issuing false orders to American units, reversing road signs, removing mine warnings, and erecting false roadblocks. Lead commando units would work alongside attacking German forces, cutting telephone lines, destroying radio stations, issuing fake orders. The commandos understood the risks. Capture in American uniform meant virtually certain execution. Yet another danger existed. In the chaos of battle, their own side might shoot them if German troops mistook them for actual Americans. For identification, they would use specific signals. Vehicles would display a small yellow triangle. Tanks would maintain particular gun positions. Soldiers would wear colored scarves beneath their uniforms. On December 14th, Panzer Brigade 150 assembled near Bad Münstereifel. The afternoon of December 16th, they moved out, advancing behind 3 attacking panzer divisions. The plan required Skorzeny's disguised forces to slip around the leading divisions once they reached the high fens, then race ahead to capture the Meuse bridges. Everything depended on rapid advancement of the 1st SS Panzer Division, commanded by Joachim Peiper. If Peiper's armored spearhead broke through quickly, Skorzeny's disguised troops could slip through the confusion and reach the bridges before American engineers destroyed them. December 16, 1944, began before first light. Through the dark forests of the Ardennes, more than 200,000 German troops launched Hitler's final great offensive in the West. The initial assault achieved complete surprise. American forces spread thinly across an 80-mile front, faced overwhelming numbers. Inexperienced American divisions confronted 30 German divisions supported by nearly 1,000 tanks. The German artillery barrage shattered the frozen morning. Searchlights reflected off low clouds to illuminate the white landscape. Infantry advanced through snow-covered forests. Panzers rumbled forward on narrow roads. For the first hours, everything went according to the German timetable. The Einheit Stielau teams infiltrated through the confusion. Dressed in American uniforms, driving captured jeeps, they slipped through the chaos of American withdrawal. One team drove directly into an American-held town, scouted all defenses, then redirected an American armored convoy down the wrong road on their way out. 2 other teams successfully misdirected Allied supply convoys, adding to the general disorder. They cut telephone lines, removed road signs, spread rumors of German breakthrough deeper than actual German positions. But on December 17th, reality shattered the operation's prospects. The 1st SS Panzer Division failed to reach its objectives on schedule. Fierce American resistance at Elsenborn Ridge denied the Germans the northern roads they desperately needed. At St. Vith, American defenders fought tenaciously, delaying the German timetable by nearly a week. The rapid breakthrough that Operation Greif required never materialized. Skorzeny realized that same day that his original mission objectives were impossible. He attended a staff conference at 6th Panzer Army headquarters and suggested his brigade be converted into a conventional military unit. The request was approved. Panzer Brigade 150 was ordered to assemble south of Malmedy and report to the 1st SS Panzer Division. But the commando teams were already far behind American lines. Some completed their missions successfully, others were captured when they failed password challenges, when alert American soldiers spotted British weapons or German boots, when their English crumbled under pressure, when they could not answer basic questions about American culture. The capture near Liège on December 17th of Pernos, Billing, and Schmidt ignited panic that would reshape the entire operation's consequences. During interrogation, Schmidt made a statement that electrified Allied intelligence. He claimed their mission was part of a larger operation to infiltrate Supreme Headquarters' Allied Expeditionary Force and either capture or assassinate General Dwight Eisenhower himself. Whether Schmidt believed this rumor or deliberately spread disinformation remains unclear. No historical evidence has ever confirmed such a plan actually existed. The real mission was capturing bridges over the Meuse River, but the statement had immediate, dramatic consequences. Within hours, security surrounding Eisenhower intensified dramatically. The Supreme Commander found himself virtually confined to his headquarters at Versailles, surrounded by guards who scrutinized everyone entering. Eisenhower was reportedly furious at the confinement, especially as it extended through Christmas. After several days, he angrily declared he needed to get out and didn't care if anyone tried to kill him. But the paranoia spread far beyond protecting one general. Allied forces, already reeling from the German offensive, now suspected potential infiltrators everywhere. Checkpoints appeared throughout the Allied rear areas, greatly restricting troop and supply movements. American military police began interrogating every soldier passing through, using questions designed specifically to identify Germans disguised as Americans. What is the capital of Illinois? Who won the World Series in 1940? Who is Mickey Mouse's girlfriend? Which team plays at Wrigley Field? Who is married to Betty Grable? Where does the guard stand in a football formation? Who is Frank Sinatra? What is the president's dog's name? The questions ranged from state geography to baseball statistics, Hollywood trivia, American slang. Military police improvised constantly, creating new questions based on whatever American trivia they could devise. The system was fundamentally chaotic and often absurd. Many genuine American soldiers could not answer the questions. Regional differences meant soldiers from one part of America knew nothing about details from other regions. Educational variation meant some Americans never learned state capitals or followed baseball at all. The checkpoints created significant problems. General Omar Bradley was detained when he correctly identified Springfield as Illinois' capital, yet the MP insisted it was Chicago and held him until his identity could be verified. Brigadier General Bruce Clark was held at gunpoint after incorrectly stating the Chicago Cubs played in the American League. A captain spent a week in detention after being caught wearing German boots he had taken as souvenirs. British soldiers faced particular challenges. When reconnaissance officer David Niven encountered a checkpoint guard demanding who won the 1940 World Series, he could only reply he hadn't the faintest idea. British troops unable to answer questions about American sports or geography were detained until their identities could be confirmed through other methods. Some American soldiers deliberately gave wrong answers to protest the absurd interrogations, resulting in their own detention. Others became angry at being questioned by junior enlisted men, creating confrontations that further slowed movement. The paranoia significantly affected military operations. Troop movements requiring hours took days as every vehicle stopped and every occupant faced questioning. Supply convoys sat idle at checkpoints while drivers struggled to prove American identity. Units rushing to reinforce threatened sectors encountered repeated interrogations. Commanders found their orders questioned by subordinates suspicious that everyone might be a German infiltrator. The psychological impact on German infiltrators was severe. Those still behind American lines found themselves unable to move freely. The cultural questions revealed gaping flaws in their preparation. They had studied military procedures, learned rank insignia, memorized American military organization, but they had not anticipated interrogations about baseball statistics, Hollywood marriages, or regional slang. Some infiltrators tried avoiding checkpoints entirely, traveling cross-country or through forests. This made them more conspicuous to American patrols. Others attempted bluffing through checkpoints, offering excuses for why they could not answer questions. Few succeeded. Between December 16th and December 31st, American forces captured 23 members of Operation Greif. 16 were captured in December 1944 alone. The team leader Günther Schultz was captured later and tried in May 1945. Each man captured during those desperate days faced a military tribunal. The legal framework was unmistakable. International law had already addressed this precise situation. Article 23 of the Hague Convention explicitly prohibited the improper use of enemy military uniforms and insignia during warfare. Soldiers apprehended while wearing the uniforms of their enemies could be prosecuted as spies rather than granted the protections afforded to prisoners of war. The first hearing convened at Houffalize on December 21st. Pernas, Billing, and Schmidt stood accused of breaching the laws of war, specifically conducting military operations while disguised in American uniforms. The evidence presented was impossible to dispute. They had been discovered in full American dress, carrying American weapons and American identification papers. Yet beneath those uniforms lay German field gray. The proceedings moved quickly. All three received guilty verdicts. The sentence was swift and final: death by firing squad. 2 days before Christmas, on December 23, 1944, the executions took place. American military police escorted the three Germans toward their fate. An officer named Captain J. Iser, attached to the 603rd Medical Clearing Station, positioned white paper targets directly over each man's heart. Schmidt's eyeglasses were removed, leaving him unable to see what lay before him. Blindfolds were wrapped around their eyes, obscuring the sky, the guns, the soldiers who would end their lives. The military police formed their ranks. Rifles lifted. At the instant of execution, Billing cried out, shouting a final devotion to Adolf Hitler. Gunfire erupted, 3 bodies crumpled, the remains were taken down, carried away, and committed to the ground. Years later, they would find their permanent rest at the German military cemetery in Lommel, Belgium, where more than 39,000 German war dead lie side by side. 13 more men connected to Operation Greif underwent similar trials and similar fates between December 21st and the final day of the year. Wilhelm Weisenfeld, Manfred Brony, Hans Reich, Arno Krause, Günther Schiltz, Erhard Miegel, Horst Görlich, Norbert Pollack, Rolf Benjamin Meyer, Hans Witzuk, Otto Struller, Alfred Franz, and Antony Morsuk all faced the same military commissions, the same verdicts, the same execution squads. Every trial followed the same legal procedure. Every defendant was found guilty of violating the Hague Convention. Every sentence received formal approval from senior commanders before implementation. The executions proceeded with military discipline, methodical and final, neither motivated by hatred nor tempered by mercy. Günther Schultz, the operations leader, experienced a different trajectory. His military commission did not convene until May 1945, months after the others. Why the delay remains unexplained. Why his execution was ordered after Germany's capitulation remains unclear as well. The Ninth Army of the United States carried out his sentence near Braunschweig on June 14th. In total, 17 Operation Greif participants were put to death for their role in wearing enemy uniforms. The tactical achievements of the entire operation amounted to almost nothing. Not a single bridge fell into German hands. No significant demolitions succeeded. Critical communications infrastructure remained intact and functional. A few directional signs were reversed. Some telephone wires were severed. Several American units received false orders, though alert personnel recognized the deception quickly and corrected course. Yet the psychological reverberations extended far beyond what the small infiltration teams actually accomplished. For weeks, American forces moved under the shadow of suspicion. Enemy infiltrators could be lurking anywhere, in the next unit, at the next checkpoint, perhaps even within headquarters itself. This pervasive paranoia influenced judgment at every command level. Eisenhower, now viewing every moment as potentially dangerous, withdrew into protective custody. The Supreme Commander became isolated from direct contact with battlefield conditions during the opening days of the offensive, precisely when his presence and observations mattered most. Checkpoints multiplied and grew more rigorous. Vehicles that should have reached defensive positions in hours were delayed by hours of interrogation and verification. The momentum that American forces needed slowed considerably. Units arriving late could not prevent German penetrations that early arrival might have stopped. Trust fractured. Soldiers who needed to focus on the enemy ahead began scanning the ranks behind them for possible infiltrators. Cohesion within units deteriorated as suspicion took root. Men watched each other. Officers questioned each other's authenticity. The Battle of the Bulge itself developed independent of Operation Greif's consequences. German forces punched deep into American lines, creating the salient that gave the battle its lasting name. At Bastogne, American soldiers dug in and refused to break. Surrounded but resolute, they held their ground. On December 22nd, German officers arrived under truce flag with a surrender demand. The American commander, Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, made a decision that would echo through military history. He typed a single word, nuts, and handed it to the German delegation. When the bewildered officers asked for clarification, they were informed it meant precisely what an American soldier would mean. Go to hell. The 101st Airborne held Bastogne through days of assault and encirclement. Relief arrived on December 26th, when General George Patton's Third Army completed a stunning 90-degree maneuver and drove north, breaking the siege and restoring the American position. Allied counter-offensives throughout early January methodically eliminated the Bulge and restored defensive lines. The engagement stretched from December 16, 1944, through January 25, 1945. Over 1 million men engaged in combat, the largest battle the American Army had fought since the Civil War. The human toll proved staggering. American losses exceeded 80,000, encompassing 19,000 killed and 23,000 captured. German casualties reached similar numbers, but Germany lacked the resources or population to replenish those losses. The battle represented the last moment when Germany could mount major offensive operations in the Western theater. Hitler had wagered everything on this final push into the Ardennes. He lost. Otto Skorzeny's direct involvement in Operation Greif ended by mid-December, when Panzer Brigade 150 ceased special operations and converted to conventional warfare. On December 21st, the brigade assaulted Malmedy but was repulsed after repeated attacks. Skorzeny himself suffered a wound from artillery fragments near Liebremont. He recovered and remained active until Germany's final surrender. In May 1945, he surrendered to the 30th Infantry Regiment. 2 years passed while authorities prepared their case against him. In 1947, the Dachau trials brought Skorzeny and 9 officers of Panzer Brigade 150 before military judges. The charges centered on improperly employing American uniforms, specifically entering combat while disguised and opening fire on American forces. Additional counts involved unlawfully acquiring American uniforms and stealing Red Cross parcels from prisoner of war camps. Skorzeny's defense hinged on a critical point of distinction. He maintained that his troops had received explicit orders to remove American uniforms before engaging in actual combat. The disguises served infiltration and deception purposes only, not fighting. A surprise witness transformed the proceedings. Freddie Foreman, a former British Special Operations executive agent, took the stand. He testified that Allied forces had employed identical methods. He himself had worn German uniforms while conducting covert operations behind German lines in France. The military tribunal absorbed this testimony and drew a crucial legal line. Using enemy uniforms purely for deception purposes differed fundamentally from wearing them during actual combat. Skorzeny presented orders showing his men were prohibited from fighting while disguised. Proving that he had ordered combat operations in American uniforms proved impossible. The tribunal acquitted all defendants. The verdict provoked considerable controversy and outcry. 17 of Skorzeny's own men had faced execution for essentially the same conduct for which he now walked free. The critical difference seemed to rest on timing and evidentiary quality. The soldiers executed in December 1944 had been captured while still wearing American uniforms. Skorzeny, tried in 1947, could produce written orders demonstrating compliance with international law. The military tribunal established significant legal precedent concerning warfare. Using enemy uniforms for deception, ruse de guerre, was deemed lawful, provided that combatants removed the disguises before engaging in combat. This distinction would shape international law interpretation for decades ahead. Skorzeny's incarceration did not last long. In 1948, he fled an internment camp near Darmstadt. Former SS officers disguised as American military police orchestrated his escape. Some historians suggest American intelligence agencies quietly permitted or perhaps facilitated his departure, yet substantiating evidence remains absent. Skorzeny moved through hiding places, first a Bavarian farmhouse, then Salzburg, then Paris, before eventually settling in Spain. He became a military consultant to Egyptian leader Gamal Abdel Nasser. On July 5, 1975, cancer claimed his life in Madrid. He was 67. Throughout his remaining decades, Skorzeny expressed no remorse for Operation Greif or for any wartime activity. The checkpoint interrogations became embedded in American military culture and law. Questions about baseball, Hollywood trivia, state capitals, and movie stars evolved into enduring symbols of how shared cultural knowledge became a security weapon during the crisis. The hastily improvised system, despite its apparent randomness, proved remarkably effective. It exposed infiltrators whose intensive language training could not replicate the instinctive cultural knowledge that Americans naturally absorbed from childhood onward. Being American transcended speaking English correctly or wearing the appropriate uniform. It meant possessing shared cultural touchstones, common references stretching back through shared history, collective memories that could not be adequately transmitted to foreigners in a few weeks of intensive instruction. This cultural coherence, usually overlooked and taken for granted, suddenly revealed itself as a legitimate national security asset when tested by enemy infiltrators. The 17 men executed for Operation Greif endure in memory, primarily through military cemeteries and historical records. Their graves at Lommel received the same meticulous maintenance afforded to soldiers who died in conventional combat operations. The cemetery makes no distinction between those executed after trial for espionage and those killed in ordinary battle. All are counted as German war dead. Manfred Pernus was merely 23 years old when the rifles fired. Gunther Billing, at 21, remained ideologically committed to Nazism until his final breath. Wilhelm Schmidt, 24, accepted his death quietly and with resignation. Each man was someone's son, possibly someone's brother. Each had made choices that converged on that frigid morning in Belgium, toward those posts, those blindfolds, those weapons. Operation Greif's broader significance extended well beyond its tactical disappointment. The operation demonstrated definitively that specialized covert missions cannot compensate for conventional military defeat. Infiltrators could not capture bridges that German panzer units never reached. No volume of deception could substitute for breakthroughs that failed to materialize. Yet the operation achieved an unexpected success. It created genuine disruption that radically exceeded what the actual infiltrators accomplished on the ground. The mere possibility of infiltration generated fear affecting hundreds of thousands of soldiers across the entire American force. This gap between perceived threat and actual accomplishment became a crucial insight in modern strategic analysis. Psychological warfare and perception often matter as much as concrete achievements. The Battle of the Bulge concluded in late January 1945. American and Allied forces recommenced their advance into Germany's interior. 4 months later, the Third Reich collapsed entirely. Hitler ended his life in his Berlin bunker. Germany surrendered without conditions on May 8, 1945. The 17 Operation Greif participants were already occupying graves in Belgian soil. Their war had ended violently, far from their homeland. Their operation failed completely in its stated tactical objectives. Yet it succeeded in generating confusion and dread that hindered Allied operations during the crucial first phase of the offensive. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill addressed Parliament on January 18, 1945. While combat still raged, he declared the struggle to be undoubtedly the greatest American battle of the war, adding that he believed it would be remembered as an ever-famous American victory. Churchill underscored that American forces engaged at a ratio of 30 to 40 Americans for every British soldier committed, emphasizing that this was fundamentally an American battle, an American triumph. The checkpoint soldiers asking about baseball did not comprehend they were building folklore. They were addressing an immediate tactical problem, improvising security measures to separate potential enemies from legitimate soldiers. Their improvised solution functioned because it drew upon genuine shared culture. Americans recognized baseball references and Hollywood figures and state capitals naturally, absorbed through American upbringing. German soldiers attempting to pass as Americans could memorize facts and figures, but could not replicate that intuitive cultural fluency. This gap between learned information and absorbed, lived culture proved decisive in practice. The German failure illustrated a principle with enduring relevance. Cultural knowledge that develops through years of lived experience cannot be rapidly taught to adults from foreign backgrounds. Modern special operations forces have absorbed the lessons Operation Greif taught. Intelligence agencies now invest years preparing deep cover agents precisely because cultural fluency cannot be rushed or artificially compressed. Language training, factual preparation, and behavioral instruction are necessary components, but they remain insufficient in isolation. Authentic cultural fluency demands immersion across extended time. The fundamental difficulty persists across generations. Culture seeps into consciousness through experience and living, not through classroom instruction. Operation Greif illustrated both the potential and limitations of unconventional warfare. Small specialized units conducting covert operations can generate disruption disproportionate to their size and numbers. Psychological consequences can exceed material results by vast margins. Yet without conventional military success, establishing the foundation, special operations cannot achieve strategic goals. Deception cannot replace genuine victory. Military historians and strategic thinkers continue studying Operation Greif as a compelling educational case. It demonstrates how planning that ignores realistic assessment of available capabilities leads to failure. Hitler's late-war decision-making followed this exact template: ambitious conception disconnected from available resources and operational reality. The operation's unexpected success in generating widespread panic, however, validated the principle that psychological operations and deception serve as force multipliers. The 17 men executed before firing squads for impersonating American soldiers would remain largely forgotten, except that history preserved their stories. They occupied no positions of significance. Before capture, they accomplished little of consequence. Their operation failed completely, yet their executions marked a pivotal point in military and legal history, establishing how international law applies to the use of enemy uniforms in warfare. Their operation's legacy lives on in lessons learned. Verifying identity remains crucial to security. Cultural knowledge remains difficult for outsiders to fabricate quickly. Unconventional operations retain value, yet cannot substitute for conventional military success. International law remains important, though interpretation shifts based on circumstances and available evidence. War's human cost extends beyond combat deaths to include those executed following capture for violating the laws of war. Each execution ended a human being, someone with family and history and unrealized potential, by bullets fired under legal authority after appropriate trial. The graves at Lommel represent lives interrupted by war and its remorseless logic. The checkpoint soldiers who posed questions about baseball carried psychological weight from their duties, including the execution of prisoners, even when those prisoners had been convicted of war crimes. Operation Greif captured no bridges whatsoever. It caused no major destruction. It resulted in relatively few direct American casualties. But fear created through infiltration delayed reinforcement movements, disrupted command structures, and diverted resources during crucial days. The indirect consequences, difficult to measure precisely, shaped how the battle's opening days unfolded. The infiltrators' rapid capture, trial, and execution, accomplished within days, demonstrated American military justice operating under wartime pressure. The speed from capture to execution reflected the urgency of combat and established precedent, though contemporary legal standards would demand more extensive deliberation. The Battle of the Bulge continued grinding forward for 5 additional weeks after the infiltrators died, ultimately resulting in German defeat and the destruction of Germany's remaining strategic reserves. The story of Operation Greif and the Battle of the Bulge offers a reminder that warfare encompasses far more than tactical battlefield operations. Psychological impact, cultural factors, and perception frequently matter as much as concrete tactical results. A failed operation that creates panic may accomplish more strategic disruption than a successful operation that remains undiscovered and unknown. The checkpoint interrogations, odd as they sometimes seemed, succeeded because they tested knowledge that authentic Americans possessed instinctively. Knowledge that infiltrators could not duplicate, regardless of how extensively they trained. American soldiers fighting in the Battle of the Bulge confronted not merely a formidable enemy offensive, but also the psychological weight of suspecting that enemies could be anywhere, wearing any uniform, speaking any language, moving within any unit. This erosion of certainty introduced a new dimension to warfare, one that would influence military operations and security procedures for generations into the future.